Okay, hi, I'm Jim Heath. I'm the president of the Institute for Systems Biology, and I'm here today with Claudia McLaughlin Ludwig, who heads our C programs and STEM education and outreach. And we're here because Claudia has a paper coming out in the Nature Communication series, Humanities and Social Sciences. And the paper is entitled Consequential Insights for Advancing Informal STEM Learning and Outcomes for Students from Historically Marginalized Communities. So the ISB, we've had, since our very inception, we've had educational outreach programs, and you've been a part of that for a long time. And this study, remarkably enough, goes back and looks at students that we've interacted with for the past 20 plus years, I think.
Yeah, 21 years, yeah.
And a big emphasis of this paper from my reading was to try to understand I think science and engineering disciplines have historically been disciplines that are in the domain of white males. And there's been significant changes in that over the past 15, 20 years. But it's still a challenge, especially in historically marginalized communities, to get kids engaged in science and technology, especially as they go on to college and what have you. And that was really, the impetus of this story was to really understand what it is that succeeds in getting those kids.
Yeah, yep. So the reality is people from historically marginalized communities want to participate in STEM, and they're seeking opportunities, but sometimes the access to opportunities aren't there, or when they actually get into an opportunity, they feel like it's not for them, and so then they change their course. And so what we've been doing over the last many years is varying our program models and measuring what leads to successful outcomes, that feeling of belonging, that how can you be your best thriving creative self. And so we've compiled a lot of data and looked at many different models to find out what aspects within programming are most effective at supporting those equitable STEM learning outcomes.
And then you had a host of different programs that kids could be engaged in, from, if I remember right, something around 20, 22 hours and something all the way up to what looked like a whole summer.
That's right.
400 and plus hours.
Yeah, so we started early on at ISB, we started with a standard 8-week or 320-hour internship. But as a relatively small research institute, we can only have so many students. And we realized that as we had up and up of 300 or more applicants each year, that we could work with students over those 320 hours, but maybe we could actually work with more students for less number of hours and be just as effective. And so then that's what we've been trying over the last many years, are kind of 4 different models. One is the 320 hour, one is like a 90-hour course here at ISB, another is a 40-hour work group that was virtual, online, and then a variety of 22-hour courses, both in person and online. And then we measured basically the same pieces of each of those programs, and then from that we were able to see what aspects are the most important to maintain and strengthen those learning outcomes, especially for students who do not normally see themselves as being a part of STEM or part of the STEM community.
And so a take-home message I got from your paper was that I'm sure high school STEM classes are useful, but there was a major differentiator between the types of programs that kids could participate in here and what they get in high school.
Yeah, absolutely. I think high schools have a certain purpose, and there's a lot of good that happens in formal high school programs, but there's really a lot of opportunity in informal programs, such as those in research institutes, museums, science centers.
And why do you think that is?
I think it's 2 main reasons, I would say, that are reasons that kind of reach out to many other reasons, and those are the access to STEM professionals and researchers
Right.
who have struggled with a lot of the barriers and kind of navigating the systems already. And those two-way developmental relationships with people who are working in STEM are really important. And then also participating in authentic research that is connected to problems that really matter to society. So I think that's an important piece, is actually being able to know that even as a high schooler, you can contribute to really high-level research, and that research is something that has a positive impact on what you care about and some of the big socio-scientific issues we have as a society, whether it's related to the environment or health.
Yeah, there were sort of two areas in which it seems like students benefited. One is that it seemed like a student could envision herself or himself in such an environment, to be in a STEM environment, in a way that they hadn't before. And then also a lot of the practical issues, which I think is kind of maybe dismissed a little bit. People don't think about that so much, but that they felt more prepared to deal with the sort of practical issues of how do you pursue a STEM career, which I thought was actually pretty interesting. And then you had comparisons between online and in-person learning, and there wasn't really that big of a difference.
Right, which was interesting. It was surprising to us as well. And I think that, I mean, one of the differences in the amount of social capital that you can develop, and that's, you know, very important, I would say, in any career field. But what we also learned, that knowing that, there were just a few programming changes you could make that lead to that improved social capital. So it was interesting that there were always improvements, but they were at different levels for certain aspects, in person versus online.
Yeah, so how do you make an ideal online course? I'm very surprised that online learning was so effective.
So
But
I will tell you,
good.
the online learning that was so effective, I think one of the important pieces of that is that it was all computationally driven. And so that computational work is something that you can do online, and sometimes it's even better to mentor a person through a project where you're sharing a screen and going through data. We tried to do kind of like at-home lab-based online courses. Those were very hard.
Right.
So I would say there is a certain type of content and practice that is really well suited for online, and then there's others that are more suited for in-person.
Right. And a lot of these kids have gone on to STEM fields when they go to college, right?
Yeah.
Do you have I don't think you report this in the paper, but do you have a quantitative feeling for your impact on that decision?
We do, and we've been kind of measuring it and staying connected with students through
Right.
LinkedIn and through surveys. Part of this paper was a retrospective survey for our alumni, and we learned that in many cases they stay in STEM, or if they do leave STEM, they're often able to describe what skills they were able to apply from their STEM training to their new field.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you're obviously doing something right, because if you look at the applicant pool that you get, I mean, I think this year we have like over almost 800 or something like that.
That's for our undergrad, yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's going up, and I think the ISB programs are looked at as sort of a model program that a lot of kids want to get into. What's next?
Yeah, I think a take-home message from the paper is that this is something that's really feasible for research institutes to do.
Right.
It's something that I feel that every research institute should be doing, and not just for undergrad and graduate and postdoctoral fellows, but for high schoolers. High schoolers can contribute at a high level. They benefit from it. It helps us with our research. So I encourage other research institutes to take some of these very practical methods for either altering existing programs or even starting new programs.
Right.
So we've been very collaborative with others in the research community at starting new programs, and it doesn't have to be a full internship program.
Right.
It could be something as short as, in the case of our study, 22 hours was kind of the one that the lowest number of hours that we went to. So that's what's next as far as the paper. It kind of gives a call to action for really this is something that you can do with minimal resources,
Right.
and there's capacity within our science funding and grant programs to enable this. But I think you really do need to be careful with what programming you choose to do. And that's
Right.
outlined, I think, pretty well in the paper. And then the other thing as far as what's next, which isn't in the paper, is something that we're working on right now, and that's in doing all of these surveys, we realize that in many cases, students from historically marginalized communities get to a certain level in science.
Right.
And they're doing well in that level of science, but the leadership opportunities are a struggle. And so now we have a new leadership program that we're implementing, and that is something that came out of this work as well.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And I just say from my own experience, it's been a challenge every step of the way through the professional career to maintain the diversity that you get, say, at high school. It's harder at college, it gets harder in grad school, and as you go on and on. And so I think a leadership program like what you're describing is sorely needed. Good job.
Yeah, thanks. We're excited about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.